Yo, what's good? It's your boy V Moss here
What
with
up?
the partner in crime Vogue for another episode of Neptune Sunday. So we always have this weird dynamic of whether or not we're recording on a Sunday or the episode comes out on Sunday. That doesn't matter. Just know in some capacity we are celebrating the Neptunes on Sunday, and this is a special Sunday. And I feel like such a loser because I say it. This is a special episode and this is a special guest, blah blah blah. But it is Sunday, and we are recording this episode for a special reason, for something that's happening this week, which we'll get into in a second. But Vogue, what up? How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say, think about Neptune Sundays like you think about church. You don't stop talking about God from Monday to Saturday. You talk about him all week. We are just celebrating on a Sunday in some form or fashion. So,
And the church said, "Amen."
all that being said, I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about what we got going on.
So we like to check in, give a little update, see what's happening in the world, specifically about Neptunes and my man P. So since we last talked to everyone, since our last guest, our episode with the amazing DJ Aisha Irene, which was awesome. Shout out to her again.
Woo, woo, woo.
There was a very important musical project that came out called I Know Nigo. So really dope project. For me, listening to it top to bottom, I think that it was a great callback to the energy and to the vibes of P and Nigo as we knew them or became to know them, and connecting it with some artists, connecting it with some sounds and the people that are popular right now. So overall, I thought the project was dope. What do you think about it?
I absolutely loved it. It gave me, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like this is a far, maybe a little bit of a reach of a comparison, but like, it gave me the same energy as like the Clones album of you got all these different people who have different sounds coming together. It personally had some of my favorite artists on there. Y'all know how I feel about Tyler. I'm also a big Rocky fan, so I was glad to see him on for a couple tracks. I was most surprised and excited by the Clips reunion we got to experience. That was a real moment for me. Like, I remember listening to it and I was like, oh my God, they're together again. So, I mean, I loved it. I listened to it like 5 times the first day.
Yeah, the project is one of the few projects that's come out in the past couple of years that me personally have listened to top to bottom back like frequently. But I think overall, like, the highlights for me, obviously having Malice and Pusha T back together was great. Malice's energy and his bars were top of the line.
Yep.
And, like I said, just what it meant to us and being in this space and coming up, thinking about back in the 2000s when Nigo and the Neptunes really, and Nigo and Pharrell really came together, and Bday the Nate was popping, and Nigo helped to start BBC Ice Cream. Like, just calling back to that time, those vibes are what really painted this picture and painted this story of like, okay, cool, this is nostalgic energy, right? Like nostalgic energy with the new flavor. I think the other part that's dope for us too, right? Like there's a couple of songs on there that we talked about on episode 9. What's next, when we're trying to read the tea leaves and see what the Neptunes, who they were working with on their Instagram, which is gone, by the way. I don't. That's another conversation when I haven't really done too much investigation into. But there was a couple of those. I think Rocky was one of them, and
Gonna.
obviously Gunna, right? And then we already had the one Ferg joint that came out, but then there was another Ferg joint on this Negro project that was dope. So yeah, man, I thought overall it was great. Obviously, like I mentioned on Twitter, the really you got to think it's intentional that we got four count P songs in a row. Like that's kind of like the Matrix. Like, do you know what you're listening to, right? Like, I thought that was dope.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's hard to pick a favorite. I would say my favorite has changed over the short amount of time this album has been out, but definitely the track with Gunna was the first song that I was like, nah, this is my favorite. Like I was listening to that headed to, it's not quite a party, but I was headed to like an event and I was listening to it. So it's a lot of good vibes.
Yeah, I like the energy of Paper Plates a lot, the Ferg joint. But yeah, it's dope. And just seeing the rollout and all of the content and the events and like all them being together and really promoting and pushing it. And obviously, the way like we keep talking about, this way that is connected this older, I'm not gonna say old, but older generation with the new generation is dope. And shout out to my boy, and I mentioned him a couple times in the podcast. I mentioned him on the Aisha episode because he's from Cali, my boy B Rob from Cali. that went to Hampton with us was actually at the Rap Caviar Spotify like album release party for this at some crazy mansion out in California. So living vicariously through his Instagram posts, he said he dapped up Pusha. So I text him back and I say, "Yo, tell him we need to get him on a episode of Neptune Sunday. Just tell him to hit me up."
Oh my God, do you want to hear me pass out?
Yeah, man. So I mean, that'll be a moment. We're gonna get somebody affiliated in some capacity on here one day. I
It's
don't know
happening.
when. It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna speak it into existence generally. I'm not gonna be specific because then we'll feel like we failed if we don't get it. So let's just say we're gonna get somebody.
You got to let the universe do its work. And I believe that the universe is working on our behalf. So when it
Yeah,
happens, you all heard it here first.
right, exactly. All right, cool. So let's get into today's topic for our episode. We said it's special, and again, I say everything is special, but this is actually special because it's an episode we're going to talk about some of our favorite songs, some of our favorite solo records from the one and only Pharrell Williams himself. Because this coming Tuesday, if I'm looking at the calendar correctly, will be his 49th birthday, which is crazy.
Happy birthday to you. That's so exciting.
49 years old, man. Like,
I don't
uh,
believe it.
yeah, I got to get me some human made, man. I got to get my skincare regimen up. Like, gotta start increasing the exfoliation routine, man.
Oh, I
Because
dead ass was getting ready to purchase. I just like, I had to look at my budget again. I was like, okay, next check. But
49 though, like
yeah,
like that's crazy to me. Like, but it's also crazy, like when you think about, okay, cool, and in relation, he's turning 49 and about to be 36. So like that's not really like that crazy.
we don't have to talk about our ages.
He looks great. Hopefully, we continue to look great. You know, this is a culturally safe space, but everybody knows the phrase that black don't
Okay.
crack.
It don't crack,
Now,
don't miss.
like, does the human made products help with that? Absolutely. It doesn't just not crack naturally. It doesn't crack because it don't crack, but like, you got to take care of yourself, right? You got to be living right. You got to drink your water, do your exfoliation. So like,
Absolutely. Moisturize your sexy, as Diddy would say.
yeah, but not with that proactive stuff. We only listen. We only use the human made out here.
Human made. I do want to tell a very quick funny story about getting ready for this episode. Vaughn hit me up and he was like, let's do our 5 favorite solo P tracks. And I was like, bet. In my mind, for whatever reason, that meant solo production tracks. So I had like 2 hours of research last night and I was like, boom, I had a list. It was tight. Then I went to go look at our run of the show and I was like, I did the wrong thing. So I don't think I used even one of those songs that I had like started writing about. And I was like, that's fine. But I thought that was hilarious. Maybe one day I'll save those tracks for another episode.
Yeah, man. So like, I think that's part of. So let's just assume that we're going to continue doing this podcast until the end of time, and he will always have a birthday for us to figure out some way to celebrate him. So maybe we'll do his best solo produced tracks next year, and the year after that we'll do his best hooks, and then the next year we'll do his best verses, rap verse, whatever. We'll get creative. But the cool thing about it, right? Like, and we talked about this a little bit before, is when you think about P's solo work as an artist, obviously he only has really 2 albums. Then you have, there's some things on some of the nerd tracks that you can consider that like really come off as him being a front man. And then talk about the soundtrack work, which I think we're going to get into a little bit here. So it's not just, okay, we're going to go through our favorite or the best like P songs, but it's like, nah, like it's not just in my mind versus girl. It's like there's a lot more out there too that hopefully will put you on game to some. Hopefully it's something you already knew.
Yeah. Well, I'll kick it off with my first track. And so I'm not putting you on anything by talking about this track, but it's something that I don't feel like we would normally have a discussion about because it's not a Neptunes produced track. My first pick is Get Lucky. And is it controversial to start off with this? Maybe, but it's arguably one of the most famous P vocals of all time. It was the second best selling single of 2013. So it was like wildly commercially successful. The song was everywhere. It was on advertisements. I don't remember being able to go anywhere without hearing that song. And I feel like it's so fun. It's the people he was working with. Like we all love Daft Punk; they're iconic. Now Rogers is on guitar. He's iconic. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I felt like it was really cementing P's status as like a superstar. Like we all see him as a superstar. He'll always be a superstar to us. But that was really like in the commercial world, in a world that's not just our cultural safe space. That's him existing in that world and really playing with like the heavy hitters. So I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah, I think Get Lucky is definitely it definitely fits that what we just described, right? Like it's not an album track from In My Mind or Girl, but it's like really that's a Pharrell song. Like when you
Yeah.
especially when you think about working with Daft Punk, like no one even knows who they are or what they look like. You can see them on the street and be like, okay, great, that's just some dude walking down the street. So but I think that's dope. I think that's definitely one of a few songs that I think, especially in that time period, that really I wouldn't say revived Pharrell's career, but kind of like put him in a different space where it was like really about him, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't really about him being a nerd or being a part of the Neptunes. It was like, all right, this is Pharrell time right now. Cause obviously we got Happy right after that or right around that same time, which was like crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Get Lucky is dope. So my first song, I think, is probably gonna be one of those underrated joints that people haven't heard. It's called Crave. It's from the Hidden Figures soundtrack. So for those of you who don't know, P produced, obviously he composed and produced the score and the soundtrack for the movie, but he also was a producer on the movie, which was dope. Hidden Figures is a very important movie about the Black women behind the scenes at NASA and their work. So a bunch of the Neptune songs, Pharrell produced songs on that soundtrack, which also features Janelle Monáe, Mary J. Blige, and someone I'm forgetting who is like also another big name. Alicia Keys has got a song on there too. So song Crave is dope. He's also got a couple other solo tracks on there, Able and Crystal Clear, which are very like dope tracks, kind of in the same vein as some of the tracks from Girl. But I thought that Crave is probably the best out of those three from that soundtrack.
Yeah. I remember I went to the movies to see Hidden Figures and P has a signature sound. So I could hear when his music started. And I was like, I don't think I knew going into Hidden Figures that he had done that work. And it was really exciting to watch a movie of that caliber and hear that he had done the music. And I mean, I feel like this is another example of P working with like some really top of the line people. He was working with like Hans Zimmer, wasn't he?
Right.
On the
Yeah,
soundtrack.
the score is composed by him and Hans Zimmer together.
That's dope. Okay. Well, staying in that same vein of like soundtracks, my next song is actually, so we all know Happy. I'm going to be safe space. I don't ever want to hear Happy again. I don't think anybody really does. Not because it's not a good song, but because I heard it so many times when it was popular. The kids loved it. But from that same Despicable Me 2 soundtrack, there's a song called Just a Cloud Away. I felt like if I was going to pick an uplifting soundtrack song to use in my life, it would actually be this one as opposed to Happy. It like talks about the cyclical nature of life and like just because you're feeling bad now doesn't mean it's going to be always. And I feel like that's a message that Pharrell is able to convey to people really easily. And like that kind of goes into the vein of what we've discussed about before, of like he doesn't always talk about like his own personal celebrity experience. He's not always making music about like just being on top, that kind of thing. I felt like it had a real humanity, but it also was like super funky and super fun. And what I didn't realize is like on the first Despicable Me soundtrack, he did like 3 tracks and he sang on the title, but then he ended up doing like the whole production for the second Despicable Me. So right. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't think I always get into soundtrack work in general. It's just not my genre, but I think I love seeing hip hop artists cross over into that lane. So
yeah, I remember when I first heard Despicable Me, like the first one from the first movie, and I was like, man, P is doing it again, man. Like this is a song that's the theme song from some kiddie movie, and I'm listening to it in the car on a regular day, just cause like,
yeah.
And so it's crazy. Like I read something that said I was talking about how he got involved in that. I guess P was at something with the CEO of the company that made the movie, and they were talking about what he needed for the movie and how like what music he needed. CEO was like, I need something that summed up the picture and the character of Gru all at once. And then P says, all of a sudden, I just started thinking about LA traffic. And then that's where I came up with Despicable Me, which is dope. I mean, I guess that makes sense. LA traffic sucks. And the character of Gru is just a grumpy old guy. But, there's a bunch of songs from those three soundtracks that are like really good. Like,
Yeah.
I think this obviously, like we talked about, Happy, but there's one from Despicable Me 3 that's called Yellow Light. That is like the beat of that one is ridiculous. It's crazy fire. So obviously, like you'll have access for everyone listening. You'll have access to the playlist. I'll have this on there. So if you haven't heard those tracks, obviously you can go look them up on your own. But we'll have them in the playlist for you to check them out after this podcast episode is over. Vogue, you're up. No, is it my turn? I'm tripping.
It's your turn.
Like I was just talking about songs, so I got confused. So my next song is first. It's our first track we're talking about. That's from an album. So we're gonna go In My Mind, Stay With Me. I think it's an underrated song with P in his R&B crooner bag,
So
getting his falsetto on, man. Just the vibes of the track are crazy. A really, really, really great Pusha verse, which Pusha shines on some of these R&B tracks whenever he is given the opportunity. He puts the coke rap aside, and he'll give you some, like a couple of my favorite Pusha verses are like R&B joints. Like he has a guest verse on a Faith Evans track that's fire. But it's classic P, R&B P, just getting you in the mood. Like
yeah. What else can you really say? I'm actually so one of my favorite tracks is actually from the same album,
hold
and it's
on, I forgot something. Before we leave, Stay With Me.
yeah.
We talked about Nigo earlier. Part of the chorus to Stay With Me from P is Feel the Babe. Like,
I forgot about that.
like what are we talking about, man? Like that's like the unintentional product placement and how you launch a brand and launch a partnership like that is I'm telling this woman to feel this babe clothing that I'm rocking in a love song. Like, come on, dog. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Your turn. Go back.
That's just good marketing. So the next song I'm going to talk about is from the same album. It's kind of in the same vein. It's R&B. You got to Take It Off, in parentheses, Dim the Lights. I want to say this is I'm going to use the word sexy instead of raunchy. This is the sexiest I've ever heard Pharrell get on a song. We got some choice lyrics, nothing too crazy, but I feel like the time that this album came out, college, coming into my own understanding, like what sexuality was for me. It was like, who better than to have here on this journey than Pharrell? So I love this song, and there's really not that much more to say about it. It's just a really good song.
I think both of those songs, we talk about how much we love In My Mind, but I think both of those songs, you have an enhanced and increased appreciation for them once you hear the Out of My Mind version with Questlove. Like it gave it's almost like a new song, but it's the same energy, and you're just like, man, I love this song even more, and this version is different. So shout out to Questlove, Academy Award winning Questlove. No more mention of the Academy Awards here after that. That's it. Shout out to Questlove.
What are the Academy Awards? I don't know.
All right. So my next song is also on In My Mind. It's You Can Do It Too, Inspirational P. I think we talked about this a little bit when we did the anniversary episode for this album about where we are in life, right? Like college days, trying to figure out life. I was working in the receiving department at Macy's, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life after I graduated and all this stuff. And you just feel like when you're listening to You Can Do It Too, that he's talking to you like, yo, yeah. I'm out here doing this, you can do it too. It's okay. It's like, yeah, okay, P, you're right, man. I can do it too. I appreciate it. Like, I appreciate that, man. And of course, we love Jamie Cullum on the outro. Don't be afraid to look up in the stars. It's just like mesmerizing. Put you in the zone.
Yeah. I still use that song for inspiration because it's just like, again, I feel like I've said this before, but like, it's just it really encapsulates the human experience. Like everybody feels like that sometimes. Everybody needs to be uplifted in that way sometimes. So it's definitely one of my all-time P favorites.
And listening to it, I never thought about this before, but listening to it the other day, it gives you vibes of like P's own version of Jay-Z's Allure. Like it's very much a testimonial of, obviously their paths are very different, but the vibes of the song are the same, but they're just telling their own story, right? And it's just like, this is how I made it work. You can do it too. And yeah, I don't know. That's just the vibe I got with this the other day. It's I can't really explain it more, but like, yeah.
So what's funny about that is I thought you were going to say a different song, and I thought Allure makes sense. So I'm tracking with that. But what I thought you were going to say was Spaceship. You may have tripped my mind when you said you was working at Macy's. I was like, come on, Kanye working at the Gap. But like, we love those kind of songs from these artists because it's like, I wasn't always that guy. I wasn't always here I am now. I had to have this faith in myself. And I had to work a regular job just like you did to get here. So just feeling that camaraderie is not the word I want to use, but it's the word I'm gonna use right now. Like just feeling that camaraderie, like
Yeah.
we've all been there.
Yeah, everyone can relate to it. And it's just like those are the type of songs that usually resonate with people more than the songs about the flashiness, because we mostly can't relate to that part. Like things that are about who you are at your or who you used to be at your core, the things that you believe in, the things that you've gone through that we can relate to are usually the songs that really stick with people more so than what did Tyler say? Raspy Shit is the worst song in MP's catalog. Yeah, because raspy shit is just like a bunch of flossy, and I don't dislike raspy shit, but I'm just saying I can understand why Tyler, who is obviously really tapped in and a big fan of them, and a similar, he's not that much younger than us, but has a similar vibe where he would relate to a song like You Can Do It Too more than you relate to raspy shit.
Yeah, I don't. When I hit the rerun on that album, I kind of just gloss over raspy shit. It's just not where I am. So we're tracking, Tyler. Please call me.
Call me if you get lost.
Yes. My next song that I'm going to talk about, again, not a song I'm putting anyone onto. Arguably one of their more famous songs, but I don't talk about this album enough for it to be as good as it is. I'm talking about Lemon from No One Ever Really Dies. What I don't think I always realized about this album is that like Pharrell did most of the production on it. So most of the time on the Nerd albums, he's working in tandem with Chad, and Chad did some additional production, but he did most of the heavy lifting on this. And he was working with Cook Harrell, sorry. And it's just like, I remember this song coming out and we were all waiting for a new NERD album. We were all waiting for, I want to say this is one of the later songs in Rihanna's musical career before we were all like put on pause forever. So we were all really excited to hear from her musically again. She beasted out on her rap. It's just a really good song and it's a really good album. Something that I was reminded of when I was revisiting this song is that album had really, really subtle but really strong like protest vibes. What is the word I'm looking for? Like it talked a lot about like revolution and rights and caring about the underdog. And I thought that was important because at this point in their career, like these dudes are famous. Like they could very easily be like, I don't care about if other people are getting by. I don't care about if other people have rights. But like shining a light on what other people need in their community, I feel is like, that's the important thing to do as a musical artist of a certain position. And so I was really happy to see them representing in that way.
Totally agree. There's lots of, like you said, revolutionary cause-based
Yes.
lyrics on there from not just them, but like from Kendrick's verses on there and MIA's feature on there, like, Andre's verse on there too. Like this was, and we got to also put in context, like this is heavy. We're in the middle of Trump era. So like there was, a lot of people were upset and not feeling things, but it's a different level to, especially in that position, to be able to be upset and not feeling things, but then actually to put it on records in your album and you're as big as Pharrell and them are, like, which is dope. And I think part of that too, like we just talked about all these like Pharrell and the features on that album were very well done, where it was like people who fit or you may not have thought they fit, but the way that they were used worked perfectly. Like a Gucci Man feature, like Wale's verse at the end of that song, the Future feature is crazy. Like obviously starting off the album in the first single, the first song on the album with a Rihanna feature, like that's crazy. I think the album is, we've had this conversation before, but I think that Nerd album is third best. Do we agree on that? Third best?
Probably. I don't even remember. I was trying to think of the rankings when I was going through stuff last night, but I don't even remember. It's just so good. And I was reading some kind of clip where somebody called it the best album since In Search of. And I was like, do I agree with that? Possibly. Possibly. I only think that personal factors would make me feel differently.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good album. I think I mean, maybe it's a bit underrated, but that's hard to say.
Hard to say. What
All
you
right.
got?
My next song I guess this is the first song that we're doing. Happy doesn't count. We talked about that. And we didn't put that on the list. It'll be in the playlist, but still, Happy doesn't count. But this is our first song we're talking about from Girl. And it is Lost Queen, which is technically two songs in one. The first part of the song is really dope, really talking about how he worships the ground that this woman walks on. Then we get this really epic crashing waves interlude for like a minute or so. And then we get this amazing 4 count P intro to a second song called Freak, short for frequency. The vibe of the song, you got to go inward. What? Like the
Yeah.
energy of that song is just amazing, beautiful R&B P. And for those of you who may not know, vocals on there assisted by the one and only JoJo. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Maybe I did at the time, but I did not remember that, I'll say.
Yes, shout out to JoJo. Did her thing. I mean, and that's crazy. Like, because obviously you remember when JoJo came out, and it was that middle school anthem "Get Out," which was like, all right. But she has. I can't really name any other songs, but like I've heard some things from her, and hearing her on this, she's definitely grown into her own. Where she's like
Oh
dope.
yeah. Oh, I'm a big JoJo fan. Like I almost went to. She was at the venue down the street, and I just didn't get tickets in time. So like I'm still a JoJo fan. The thing about this album, speaking about activism, like we were talking with the last, I think that he did a really good job of highlighting women. Like, I mean, like, the album's called Girl, but he did a really good job of celebrating and highlighting women again as a man in power who don't got to talk about it. Just really bringing light and joy to the experience of like having women who are dope in your life. I love this song. There are a few tracks on that album that I wrestle with putting on this list. But Lost Queen is definitely one of my favorites.
All right, your last one. Go for it.
Yeah. Yet again, we have a track that is not produced by Pharrell. I think that that's significant because this song specifically, I think, could be a part of the girl track listing. It's Midsection by Kaytranada. And if you ever listen to a Kaytranada album, he always has a bunch of features. He is not a musician in that he like adds vocals to the track. It sounds like a Pharrell song. He really beasted out. And what I found out was that the idea of them collaborating came up on Pharrell's Beats One show, Other Tone. And he makes a specific comment to Kaytranada about like Kaytranada's music having a specific sound, but not sounding the same. So like he's not making the same track 50 times, which is something I think that we can definitely say about the Neptunes, about Pharrell. I think that's anybody you would call a child of Pharrell, that is the qualifying marker of like really unique individual artists who have a sound, but they don't overdo shit.
Right.
I love this song. I love Kaytranada. I was not surprised, but really happy to see that like P is his idol because can relate. I love this song.
Yeah, that's literally their MO is maintaining the vibe, maintaining the feel, but also like being able to make it different enough that you don't get tired of it, which I think is, and I think that's important to note, right? Like through our lifetime, and again, we're talking about our age here, like we have been around for a lot of producers that get hot and they make the same sounding song 20 times and then no one wants to hear from them again. Like there's a bunch of them that I can remember, and I don't want to name names, but like that you just have that energy and you're just like, yo, that one song that they made or that set of songs were so crazy. Where's that person at now? Right. Like, so you got to give people credit. And I think and Aisha talked about it on her episode because she's cool with Hit Boy. Hit Boy has done a good job of embracing that too, because Hit Boy is, he just could have made a bunch of niggas in Paris and he didn't. He was like, and he has benefited from that, from being able to stay relevant, but also stay creative and mix and match and come up with a new versions of his sound and work with different artists over time.
Yeah, constantly pushing yourself and like upping the ante on your creativity. I'm just so impressed at the influence that Pharrell has had on this generation of people, on the last generation of people. It's really dope to see. Bring us on home.
Okay. I mean, this is obviously important. This is important to put on this list. Got to go with Frontin'. That's quintessential R&B P.
Quintessential, the best P track of all time in my mind. Ha, pun not intended.
His song on Clones, obviously, very important, but short, impactful verse from the one and only Sean Carter. Subliminal love letter to the one and only Beyonce Knowles Carter. Amazing video, Lauren London. It's dope. Another thing to bring back to Nigo, which we started the show off with. That was the first time on a grand world stage that people saw clothing and logos from BBC Ice Cream, which is dope. I remember seeing that BBC branded tee that P was wearing. I was like, yo. But he also had on the white polo with the moon man where the horse would be. And I was like, I gotta have it. Gotta have it, man. Gotta have it. So it's dope. I mean, really, really unintentional, but really cool way for us to bring this episode full circle. The relationship with Nigo and P and how they've helped each other is really cool. And reading Pharrell's book, Places and Spaces I've Been, there's an interview, a conversation with Nigo, just kind of talking about how their relationship built. And P said it, that when they got connected back in 2005 and started working together on the BBC Ice Cream brand, P said Nigo made all his dreams into reality. So it's always great. And it's always something that I think that people necessarily understand at this level. Like, to get to that point where you're good at one thing and you want to do something else, to have success in it, you need other people involved, partners, right?
Yeah.
Who are mastered or bring some unique perspective to that area that you have all these cool ideas for clothes because you're this great music artist, but you still got to have someone who actually knows that world to help take it to the next level. And I think that's really cool about the fact that you bring someone who's not from here, who's from a different culture, from a different country, to even make it more dynamic and more unique. So shout out to Nigo, shout out to P. I think that's really, a really cool example of how in the world of multi-hyphenates, there's a blueprint for doing it right. And it comes down to, being good at what you are and having your ideas, but also being open to having people who actually know what they're talking about support and guide you in this new space.
Absolutely. And it gives me a increased level of respect for Pharrell, because I feel like he definitely is cognizant of his strengths. He's cognizant of bringing other people who have the know-how, who have different viewpoints than him, constantly expanding. So you're not just getting his thoughts reiterated 1,000 times. He's adding to the conversation. He's having conversations with people who he also respects as creators and artists and stuff like that. So I will always celebrate him for those reasons, for actually trying to up the culture as a whole, as opposed to leveling himself up alone, because we're always better together.
For sure. All right, before we wrap this up, this is unplanned, but I planned it, but you used to know. You have to choose between In My Mind or Girl. Go.
In my mind.
See, I have a hard time with this just because they're not equal. They're different because it's hard to compare them straight up because there's no raps on Girl.
Right. I would go as far to say, to me, those are two different Pharrells.
Interesting point. Interesting point. I think that Girl is really good, and it's just a vibe that's like cohesive in a way that In My Mind is almost a two-part album.
Fair. Okay. Fair. What I'll say, I'll speak more on that's two different Pharrells. Like, you think about this is something that Aisha was talking about in her episode. Like, the time, the cultural considerations that go into making an album, they all have an effect on what comes out. So you got P getting ready to strike out on his own as a solo artist, trying to separate himself from the work he did with Nerd. I feel like that created a much different sound from a person that is renowned worldwide, universally, if you want to really get real with it, who's making an album about like a certain topic, zoning into specific things. It's just, to me, you can't compare those albums.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess my vote is for, I don't know.
Well, you take one, I take one. We got the map covered. So
I'm just gonna say Girl. It's hard. I can't. I'm just gonna say. Yeah. I'm just gonna say Girl, just for the sake of what you said, just so it's covered, right? It's covered.
Yeah, I think the point is we love P. So happy birthday.
That's what this is all about, man. It's a hard decision. There's no wrong answers. Girls got some really big records on there too, though. Like I'm standing firm in that now. I'm embracing it. You got to remember too. We didn't talk about "Come Get It, Bay," which was a big deal because
Oh my God.
because Miley was popping. You know, the joint with Justin was like
That almost made my list.
that was very good. Even, rounding out the album with and this is okay, the Alicia Keys joint. That joint was fire too, but purposely didn't put those two on the list because I view those as duets more so than like a solo P track.
Okay.
But both of those are very strong.
I mean, I almost added the song with Justin. Don't be mistaken. When we get off this call, I'm gonna turn on girl. So if that gives you any points towards voting for that album, I love that album. I haven't heard it in a while. I think that it's the perfect song to like pop off a happy Sunday fun day. So there's a lot of merit in both.
All right, folks. Hopefully, you guys are out there ready to celebrate the life of Pharrell Williams on this coming Tuesday. Hopefully, you heard or learned about some songs that you didn't know about. Hopefully, you reminisce about some tracks that you love. Look out for the playlist. Look out for the episode coming out this Tuesday. And yeah, peace and love and happy birthday, P. Thank you so much, man. If you ever hear this, we're really appreciative, man, and glad you're here.
Endlessly grateful.
All
Y'all
right.
stay
Peace and love. See y'all later. Or here, talk to y'all later. Whatever. You know the vibes. Catch y'all next Neptune Sunday. All right, bye.
up.